There are places on Earth where the planet's heartbeat can be felt. Not metaphorically, not poetically, but truly. Kilauea, a name whispered with reverence by the Hawaiian people for over 1,000 years. A volcano so active, so alive, that it has shaped not only the land beneath it, but the very souls of those who have lived in its shadow. For generations, Kilauea was constant, predictable in its power. The glow of molten lava reflected against night clouds became a beacon, a lighthouse of fire that never went dark. But in 2018, something changed. The Earth held its breath. The lava lake that had glowed for years vanished, drained away into the deep geology beneath. The crater collapsed upon itself, swallowing centuries of accumulated rock. What remained was a silent void 500 meters deep, a wound in the mountain. For 2 years, Kilauea was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels unnatural. The kind of silence that makes you wonder if something has ended, or if something is waiting. Scientists watched, instruments measured. The world moved on. But the Earth remembers. And on December 20th, 2020, deep within that darkness, the mountain stirred. This is not a story of destruction. This is a story of return. To understand Kilauea, you must first understand that it is not merely a volcano. It is a home. For the native Hawaiian people, Kilauea is the earthly dwelling of Pele, the goddess of fire, lightning, wind, and volcanoes. She is not a distant deity. She is present, active. Her moods shape the land. Her breath becomes the sky. When lava flows, it is Pele moving through her domain. When the mountain trembles, it is her voice. And when the fire dims, as it did in 2018, it is said that she has traveled elsewhere, perhaps to tend to another part of her island kingdom. This is not superstition. This is relationship. A way of knowing the land that stretches back centuries, long before seismographs and satellite imagery. The Hawaiian people read the mountain the way you might read the face of someone you have known your entire life. They see what science sometimes cannot, the subtle shifts in temperament, the quiet warnings, the rhythm beneath the rhythm. Kilauea has been erupting in one form or another for at least 600,000 years. It is one of the most active volcanoes on Earth, but its modern eruptive history, the history we can document with certainty, begins in 1823, when the first Western observers recorded the presence of a lava lake within Halemaʻumaʻu crater. What they saw astonished them. A churning cauldron of molten rock, glowing day and night, contained within a pit that seemed to descend into the very core of the planet. It was both terrifying and mesmerizing. Visitors came from across the world to witness it, this window into the Earth's interior. Over the decades, the lava lake rose and fell. Sometimes it overflowed, sending rivers of fire across the caldera floor. Sometimes it withdrew deep into the throat of the mountain, visible only as a distant red glow. But it was always there. A constant presence, a reliable wonder. Then, in 2008, after nearly a century of dormancy within the summit crater, the lava lake returned with dramatic force. A new vent opened. Magma surged upward. Within days, a boiling lake of lava had reformed at the bottom of Halemaʻumaʻu. For the next 10 years, it would remain. Scientists from the United States Geological Survey established permanent monitoring stations around the summit. They measured gas emissions, ground deformation, seismic activity. They watched the lava lake pulse and churn, its surface rising and falling with the breathing of the magma chamber below. It became one of the most closely observed volcanic features on the planet. Visitors to Hawaiʻi Volcanoes National Park would stand at the crater's edge at night and see the glow, a sight that connected them, however briefly, to something primal, something that predates cities and nations and all of human history. But volcanoes do not exist for our wonder. They exist because the Earth is alive. Because deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, a hotspot in the mantle, a plume of superheated rock, has been burning its way through the oceanic crust for millions of years. As the Pacific Plate moves northwest, the hotspot remains stationary, punching through the crust again and again, creating the Hawaiian island chain like a welder's torch moving across metal. Kilauea is the youngest expression of this process. It sits directly above the hotspot. And because of this, it is fed by an almost inexhaustible supply of magma. Almost. In early 2018, something deep within the volcano's plumbing system shifted. Magma that had been feeding the summit lava lake began migrating eastward, following fractures in the rift zone. Pressure built. The ground cracked. And on May 3, 2018, magma broke through the surface in the lower Puna district, more than 25 miles from the summit. What followed was catastrophic. Lava fountains erupted from fissures that opened across residential neighborhoods. Homes were consumed, roads buried, entire communities evacuated. The eruption continued for months, destroying over 700 structures and covering more than 13 square miles with fresh lava. But something else was happening at the summit. With magma draining away to feed the lower eruption, the lava lake at Halemaʻumaʻu began to drop rapidly. Within days, it had vanished entirely. The crater floor collapsed inward, again and again, in a series of violent subsidence events. Ash plumes rose thousands of feet into the air. Earthquakes shook the mountain. By August 2018, when the eruption finally ended, Halemaʻumaʻu crater had grown to more than twice its previous size. Where there had once been a glowing lake of lava, there was now only a vast, empty pit, silent and dark. Peel, it seemed, had left. The mountain went quiet. For 2 years, nothing stirred. And then, on a December night in 2020, deep within that darkness, the Earth remembered what it was. Before we continue this story, subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us tell the true stories of Earth's most powerful volcanoes. December 20th, 2020, 9:30 in the evening, Hawaiian time. The seismographs began to tremble. Not violently. Not with the dramatic force that announces a catastrophe. But persistently. Rhythmically. The needles on the instruments traced sharp, repetitive lines, the unmistakable signature of magma on the move. At the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, scientists who had spent 2 years watching a silent mountain suddenly found themselves staring at screens that were alive with activity. Earthquake after earthquake. Dozens of them. Shallow. Clustered directly beneath Halemaʻumaʻu crater. Something was rising. Within 30 minutes, the first visual confirmation arrived. A webcam position at the crater's edge, operating in infrared to pierce the darkness, detected a faint thermal anomaly at the bottom of the pit. A glow. Barely perceptible at first, but growing. By 10 p.m., it was undeniable. Lava had returned to Kilauea. The scientists issued alerts immediately. Not warnings of danger, the eruption was contained entirely within the national park, far from any populated areas, but notifications. Updates. A signal to the world that one of Earth's most watched volcanoes had awakened, from its longest silence in decades. What happened next unfolded with a speed that surprised even those who study volcanoes for a living. Within hours, not minutes, but hours, the floor of Halemaʻumaʻu crater was covered in molten lava. Fountains erupted from vents along the western wall, arcing bright orange against the night. Lava cascaded down the crater walls like waterfalls of fire, pooling at the bottom, spreading outward, filling the void that had been empty for so long. By the next morning, a lava lake had formed. Not the same lake that had existed before 2018. This was new, fresh, a different expression of the same deep source. The lava was hotter, more fluid. It moved with a restless energy, circulating in great convective cells, its surface constantly reshaping itself. Geologists describe lava lakes as windows into the magma plumbing system of a volcano. They are rare features. Only a handful exist on Earth at any given time. To have one return after such a dramatic collapse was extraordinary. But why did it return? The answer lies deep beneath the surface, in a network of pathways and chambers that we can map but never fully see. When the 2018 eruption drained magma from the summit, it did not empty the system entirely. The hotspot beneath Kilauea never stopped producing magma. It continued to rise slowly under immense pressure, searching for the path of least resistance. For 2 years, that path was blocked, sealed by cooled rock and debris from the collapse. But magma is patient, it waits, it builds pressure. And when the pressure becomes great enough, it finds a way. In December 2020, it found its way back to Halemaʻumaʻu. The eruption was not explosive. There were no towering ash clouds, no pyroclastic flows, no threat to nearby communities. This was what volcanologists call an effusive eruption, lava flowing steadily, almost gently from the Earth's interior. The kind of eruption that allows you to stand at a safe distance and watch. And people did watch. Even in the midst of a global pandemic, even with the national park operating under restricted access, the return of Kilauea's lava lake became a moment of collective attention. News outlets carried live feeds from the crater rim. Social media filled with images of the glowing lake. For many native Hawaiians, it was a homecoming. Peel had returned. The cultural significance cannot be understated. In Hawaiian tradition, Peel is both creator and destroyer. She builds new land and reclaims the old. Her presence is a reminder that the islands themselves are not permanent. They are part of an ongoing process, a geological story still being written. To see the fire return was to witness the continuation of that story. But beneath the cultural and emotional layers, there was science to be done. The Hawaiian Volcano Observatory mobilized immediately. Thermal cameras were repositioned, gas sensors recalibrated. Drones equipped with specialized instruments were flown over the crater to measure the lake's temperature, its rate of growth, the composition of gases being released. What they discovered was fascinating. The new lava lake was rising. Not quickly, but steadily. Every day, the surface climbed a little higher. Solidified lava along the edges would crack and break as fresh magma pushed upward from below. The lake was not static. It was actively filling the crater, layer by layer, rebuilding what had been lost. By the end of December, the lava lake had grown to cover the entire crater floor, a surface area of roughly 80 acres. Its depth was estimated at over 200 meters, and it showed no signs of stopping. Scientists began to ask a question that no one could yet answer. How long would this continue? Would the lake drain again as it had in 2018? Would it overflow, sending lava across the caldera floor? Or would it settle into a stable equilibrium, glowing quietly for years as it had before? The mountain, as always, would answer in its own time. A lava lake is not a pond of liquid rock sitting passively at the bottom of a crater. It is a living system. Molten magma rises from deep chambers, sometimes several kilometers below the surface, driven upward by pressure and heat. When it reaches the crater floor, it spreads outward, cools slightly at the surface, and forms a thin, flexible crust-like skin forming on hot milk. But beneath that crust, the lava remains violently active. Convection currents churn the molten rock in great rotating cells. Hot magma rises in the center, cools and darkens at the edges, then sinks back down to be reheated. The surface cracks and buckles constantly. Plates of cooled lava collide and override one another, glowing orange at the seams where fresh magma wells up between them. At night, from the rim of Halemaʻumaʻu, you can see this process with startling clarity. The lake glows. Not uniformly, but in patterns. Bright lines trace the boundaries of convection cells. Darker patches mark where the crust has thickened. And every few minutes, a section of the surface will suddenly fountain upward, a brief, explosive release of gas trapped beneath the crust. It is hypnotic. But for scientists, it is also invaluable. Lava lakes are rare because they require very specific conditions. The magma must be fluid enough to flow freely, but viscous enough to remain contained. The supply from below must be steady and sustained, and the vent must be open, not blocked by debris or solidified rock. Only a handful of volcanoes on Earth maintain persistent lava lakes. Kilauea is one of them, Erta Ale in Ethiopia, Nyiragongo in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mount Erebus in Antarctica. Each one offers scientists a direct view into the processes that occur deep within the planet. At Kilauea, the return of the lava lake in 2020 provided an unprecedented opportunity. The Hawaiian Volcano Observatory had spent the previous 2 years refining their monitoring network. New seismometers had been installed. Satellite radar systems tracked millimeter-scale changes in ground elevation. Gas analyzers measured sulfur dioxide emissions in real time. When the lava returned, they were ready. One of the first things they measured was temperature. Using thermal cameras mounted on the crater rim, scientists recorded surface temperatures of the lava lake ranging from 800 to 1,100 degrees Celsius. The hotter zones glowing bright yellow-orange marked areas where fresh magma was actively upwelling. The cooler zones, darker red, almost black, were sections where the crust had thickened and insulated the heat below. But temperature alone does not tell the full story. Gas emissions revealed what was happening deeper in the system. Every day, thousands of tons of sulfur dioxide rose from the lava lake into the atmosphere. This gas is dissolved in magma under pressure. When the magma reaches the surface and pressure drops, the gas escapes like opening a bottle of carbonated water. The rate of gas emission told scientists how much magma was moving through the system. A sudden increase in sulfur dioxide meant more magma was rising. A decrease suggested the supply was slowing. Throughout early 2021, the emissions remained high and steady. The volcano was being fed continuously from below. Another key measurement was the lake's rise rate. Using laser ranging instruments and photogrammetry, scientists calculated that the surface of the lava lake was climbing at an average rate of 1 meter per day. Some days it rose faster, some days it slowed, but the overall trend was unmistakable. The crater was filling. By March 2021, the lake had risen more than 200 meters from its initial level. It now occupied a significant portion of the crater that had collapsed in 2018. Solidified. Lava formed broad terraces along the walls, marking previous high stands of the lake. It was, in essence, rebuilding itself. But lava lakes are not stable features. They respond to changes in pressure deep within the magma system. A sudden influx of magma can cause the lake to rise rapidly, even overflow. A drop in pressure can cause it to drain away in hours. In April 2021, the lake did something unexpected. It began to oscillate, not dramatically, but measurably. The surface would rise several meters over the course of a few hours, then drop back down. Rise again, drop again. The pattern repeated in cycles lasting anywhere from 12 to 24 hours. Scientists recognized this behavior immediately. It was a sign of pressure changes deep in the magma conduit, like a piston moving up and down. Magma was being pushed upward from below, then retreating as pressure equalized, then being pushed upward again. This kind of oscillation is rare, and it provided critical data about the geometry of the magma plumbing beneath Kilauea. By analyzing the frequency and amplitude of the cycles, researchers could estimate the depth and volume of the magma reservoir feeding the eruption. It was not guesswork. It was mathematics applied to observation. And it worked. The data suggested that the magma was rising from a reservoir approximately 3 to 5 kilometers below the surface, far shallower than the deep hotspot source, but deep enough to sustain the eruption for months, possibly years. The question remained, how long would it last? Kilauea's previous summit lava lake had persisted for 10 years. But every eruption is different. Magma supply rates vary. Pathways can become blocked. The volcano's behavior is influenced by factors we cannot always predict. All scientists could do was watch and wait, and document every change, every tremor, every shift in temperature and gas emission. Because this was not just an eruption. This was a conversation between the Earth and those who study it. And the mountain was speaking clearly. By the summer of 2021, the lava lake at Halemaʻumaʻu had become a fixture once again. Visitors to Hawaiʻi Volcanoes National Park could stand at designated overlooks and watch the glow, just as their grandparents might have done decades earlier. The Park Service installed new viewing platforms. Interpretive signs explained the geology. Rangers led evening programs where families gathered in the darkness to witness the firelight. Dancing against the crater walls, it felt in many ways like a return to normalcy. But normal when it comes to volcanoes is a temporary condition. The lava lake continued to rise through the spring and summer months. By July, it had climbed more than 250 meters from its starting point. The surface area remained vast, covering nearly the entire crater floor. And the activity, while fluctuating day to day, showed no signs of stopping. Scientists noted something else. The lake was becoming more stable. In its earliest weeks, the surface had been chaotic fountaining, spattering, constantly breaking apart and reforming. But as the months passed, the lava began to behave more predictably. Convection patterns became regular. The crust thickened in consistent zones. The oscillations in lake level, while still present, grew smaller in amplitude. It was as if the system was finding equilibrium. This is not unusual. Volcanic eruptions often begin with intense, erratic activity, then settle into a more sustained rhythm as the magma pathways stabilize. The initial breakthrough is violent because pressure has been building. But once a vent is established and magma can flow freely, the eruption becomes less chaotic. Kilauea was no exception. By late 2021, the lava lake had entered what scientists describe as a steady-state phase. Magma continued to rise from below at a relatively constant rate. The lake surface rose slowly but predictably. Gas emissions remained high but stable. For the researchers monitoring the volcano, this was both reassuring and limiting. Reassuring, because it meant the eruption posed no immediate threat. There were no signs of explosive activity. No indications that the magma supply was surging unpredictably. The mountain was active, yes, but not dangerous. Limiting, because steady-state eruptions offer fewer clues about what might happen next. When a volcano behaves erratically, each change provides data. A sudden increase in seismicity might signal a new intrusion of magma. A spike in gas emissions could indicate a deeper connection opening. But when everything remains constant, there is less to analyze. The volcano becomes a black box, running a program we can observe but not fully decode. Still, the work continued. Teams from the USGS, university research groups, and international collaborators descended on Kilauea throughout 2021 and 2022. They collected samples of volcanic gas using drones flown directly over the lake. They deployed ground-penetrating radar to map changes in the subsurface. They analyzed the chemical composition of lava samples to trace where the magma had originated. One discovery stood out. The lava feeding the new lake was slightly different in composition from the lava that had filled the crater before 2018, not dramatically different. Not in ways that would be visible to the eye, but different enough that geochemists could identify subtle variations in the proportions of magnesium, iron, and other trace elements. This suggested something significant. The magma was not simply the same material that had drained away in 2018, now flowing back. It was fresh magma, drawn from a slightly deeper or slightly different part of the mantle plume beneath the volcano. The hotspot, in other words, was still producing. Still feeding the mountain with new molten rock from the deep earth. This has profound implications. It means Kilauea is not exhausting its supply. It is not running dry. The volcano is being continuously replenished, and as long as the Pacific Plate continues its slow migration over the hotspot, the eruptions will continue. Not every day. Not without pauses, perhaps decades long. But over geological time, Kilauea will remain active for hundreds of thousands of years. We are not witnessing the end of a process. We are witnessing a moment in the middle of a story that began long before humans arrived on these islands and will continue long after we are gone. There is something humbling in that realization. We build our homes, our cities, our lives on a timescale of years and decades. We think in terms of generations, perhaps a century if we are historically minded. But the Earth thinks in millennia. In epochs, in spans of time so vast that entire mountain ranges rise and erode within them. Kilauea has been erupting for 600,000 years. The Hawaiian Islands themselves are only 5 million years old. And the hotspot that created them has been active for at least 70 million years, punching through the Pacific crust again and again, creating a chain of underwater mountains and islands that stretches across half an ocean. We are temporary visitors to this process. The mountain does not know we are here. And yet we watch, we measure, we try to understand. Perhaps that is enough. Stories like this are not meant to be rushed. They are meant to be followed by those who still listen. By those who understand that some narratives unfold not in minutes, but in millennia. If this journey resonates with you, you are already part of Fury of the Earth, and the story is far from over. By early 2023, the lava lake at Halemaʻumaʻu had been active for more than 2 years. It showed no signs of stopping. The surface continued to churn. The glow continued to illuminate the night sky. And beneath it all, invisible but measurable, the machinery of the Earth continued its ancient work. Magma rose, cooled, solidified, rose again. The cycle repeated, endlessly, patiently. The mountain had returned. And those who study it knew that this return was not an ending. It was simply the latest chapter in a narrative written in fire and stone. A narrative that will outlast nations, languages, and perhaps even our species. The Earth remembers. And it continues. Always. There is a building on the northern rim of Kilauea caldera that never sleeps. The Hawaiian Volcano Observatory. Established in 1912, it is one of the oldest continuously operating volcano observatories in the world. For over a century, scientists have gathered here to watch, measure, and attempt to understand one of the planet's most active volcanoes. The work is not glamorous. It is patient, meticulous, often repetitive. Every day, instruments scattered across the volcano transmit data seismic readings, GPS measurements, gas concentrations, thermal images. Every day, that data must be analyzed, compared to historical patterns, checked for anomalies. Most days, nothing dramatic happens. But the observers know that within those quiet patterns, within those seemingly mundane fluctuations in ground tilt or sulfur dioxide levels, lies critical information. The mountain speaks constantly. You simply have to learn its language. When the lava lake returned in December 2020, the observatory became a hub of intensified activity. Researchers worked in rotating shifts to maintain continuous monitoring. Graduate students arrived from universities across the United States and beyond, eager to study a phenomenon that occurs only rarely. International teams brought specialized equipment, high-resolution thermal cameras, gas spectrometers, seismic arrays capable of detecting the movement of magma deep underground. The goal was not simply to watch the eruption. It was to understand it at a level of detail never before achieved. One of the most significant advances came from a technique called INSAR interferometric synthetic aperture radar. This technology uses satellites to measure minute changes in the elevation of the ground. By comparing radar images taken days or weeks apart, scientists can detect movements as small as a few millimeters. When magma moves beneath a volcano, it causes the ground above to bulge or subside. INSAR can see this happening in real time. At Kilauea, INSAR revealed something unexpected. While the lava lake was rising steadily at the surface, the ground surrounding the summit was actually subsiding, sinking. Not dramatically, but measurably a few centimeters per month. This told scientists that even though magma was flowing into the crater and filling the lake, the overall volume of magma stored beneath the summit was decreasing. More was leaving the system than was entering it. In other words, the volcano was not inflating with new magma. It was deflating. This suggested that the eruption was drawing from a finite reservoir, likely the shallow magma chamber that had refilled slowly after the 2018 collapse. Eventually, if the supply from deeper sources did not increase, the eruption would slow. The lake would stop rising. Perhaps it would even drain again. But predicting when that might happen was impossible. Volcanoes do not follow schedules. They respond to pressures and conditions we can measure but cannot control. A sudden influx of magma from the deep mantle could sustain the eruption for years. A blockage in the conduit could shut it down in days. All the scientists could do was continue watching and listening. Seismology, the study of earthquakes, provides another critical window into volcanic behavior. Beneath Kilauea, hundreds of small earthquakes occur every week. Most are too faint to be felt by humans, but sensitive seismometers detect them all. By analyzing the location, depth, and frequency of these tremors, scientists can map the movement of magma underground. During the 2020 eruption, seismic data revealed a clear pattern. Magma was rising from a deep reservoir located roughly 30 to 40 kilometers beneath the surface, near the boundary between the Earth's crust and mantle. It traveled upward through narrow conduits, accumulating in a shallow chamber just 2 to 3 kilometers below Halemaʻumaʻu crater. From there, it fed the lava lake. But the pathway was not smooth. Earthquakes clustered along certain zones, indicating places where the conduit was constricted or where magma was forcing its way through fractured rock. These zones acted like valves, regulating the flow. When pressure built up behind a constriction, magma would push through in pulses, causing brief increases in earthquake activity and corresponding surges in the lava lake's level. Understanding this plumbing system is critical for forecasting future eruptions. If scientists can identify where magma is likely to stall or accumulate, they can better predict where and when the next eruption might occur, whether at the summit or along one of Kilauea's rift zones or somewhere entirely new. This knowledge saves lives. It allows authorities to issue warnings, evacuate communities, close roads and parks before danger arrives. It transforms a volcano from an unpredictable threat into a monitored presence, still dangerous, but no longer incomprehensible. Yet, even with all this technology, all this data, there are limits to what we can know. We cannot see directly into the magma chamber. We cannot sample the molten rock until it reaches the surface. We cannot predict with certainty how the system will respond to changes in pressure or supply. We are, in a sense, doctors examining a patient whose body we cannot open. We listen to the heartbeat. We measure the temperature. We watch for symptoms, but the inner workings remain hidden. This humility is essential. Scientists who study volcanoes learn quickly that nature does not reveal all its secrets. There will always be surprises. Eruptions that begin without warning. Lava flows that take unexpected paths. Pauses in activity that last decades, then resume without explanation. The mountain keeps its own counsel, and so the work continues. Day after day, year after year, instruments are maintained. Data is recorded. Patterns are analyzed, not because we can control the volcano, but because understanding, even incomplete understanding, is better than ignorance. And because every measurement, every observation, every eruption studied adds to a body of knowledge that may one day help protect future generations. The lava lake at Halemaʻumaʻu glows on, and the watchers remain at their posts, patient, vigilant, listening to the language of the earth. There are moments in life when science and culture meet at the edge of a crater, when data and devotion observe the same phenomenon, and both find meaning. For the native Hawaiian community, the return of the lava lake in December 2020 was not merely a geological event. It was a homecoming. Peel had returned to her dwelling. The fire that had vanished in 2018, taking with it a sense of continuity that had endured for generations, was burning once more. This is not metaphor, this is relationship. In Hawaiian tradition, the natural world is not separate from the human world. Mountains, oceans, forests, and volcanoes are not resources to be managed or landscapes to be admired. They are family, ancestors, living entities with mana-spiritual power and presence. Peel is not a symbol of volcanic activity. She is the volcanic activity. When lava flows, it is her movement through the land. When the mountain trembles, it is her voice. And when the fire returns after absence, it is her choice to come home. This perspective, far from being outdated or superstitious, offers something that science alone cannot provide: a framework for living with a volcano. Not in spite of it, not in fear of it, but alongside it. The Hawaiian relationship with Kilauea is ancient. Archaeological evidence shows that people have lived on the island for at least 1,500 years, building communities, cultivating crops, and raising families within sight of active lava flows. They witnessed eruptions that modern science has no record of. They developed oral traditions that preserved knowledge of volcanic behavior across centuries. These traditions are not written in textbooks. They are chanted, sung, passed from elder to child in the Hawaiian language, a language that contains words for types of lava, stages of volcanic activity, and subtle changes in the mountain's temperament that have no direct translation in English. When Western scientists arrived in the 19th century, they brought instruments and theories. But the Hawaiians already possessed a deep, experiential understanding of the volcano. They knew where lava was likely to flow. They recognized the signs that preceded an eruption. They understood intuitively, what researchers would later confirm through decades of study, that Kilauea is not a threat to be conquered, but a presence to be respected. This knowledge was often dismissed. For much of the 20th century, indigenous perspectives were marginalized in favor of Western scientific approaches. Hawaiian cultural practices at the volcano were sometimes restricted or misunderstood. The language itself was suppressed, nearly lost. But in recent decades, something has shifted. There's growing recognition within both the scientific community and the broader public that indigenous knowledge and scientific knowledge are not competitors. They are complementary. Each illuminates aspects of reality that the other might miss. Hawaiian practitioners, kumu, cultural experts, kahuna, now work alongside geologists and seismologists. They participate in discussions about volcano monitoring and public safety. Their perspectives inform how eruptions are communicated to the public, how sacred sites are protected, and how the land is managed. When the lava lake returned in 2020, this collaboration became visible. As scientists deployed their instruments, Hawaiian families returned to traditional overlooks to observe the glow, to chant, to offer ho'okupu gifts of respect. Leis of flowers and ti leaves were placed at the crater's edge. Oli ceremonial chants were sung in the pre-dawn darkness, acknowledging Peel's presence and asking for her protection. These rituals are not performed for tourists. They are performed because they matter, because they maintain a relationship that has endured for generations, because acknowledging the mana of the place is as important as measuring its temperature. For many native Hawaiians, the eruption also carries a message. Peel is considered a force of both creation and destruction. She takes land, burying homes, roads, entire communities beneath fresh lava. but she also creates land. Every flow adds to the island. Every eruption is an act of building, of renewal. This duality is central to the Hawaiian worldview. Nothing is permanent. Everything changes. The land you stand on today may be ocean tomorrow or may be covered in forest a century from now. To live in Hawaii is to accept this impermanence, to understand that the islands themselves are part of an ongoing process. Western culture often struggles with this idea. We build as if our structures will last forever. We plan cities on timelines of decades, perhaps a century. We are deeply unsettled by the idea that the ground beneath us is not stable, that forces beyond our control can erase what we have built. But the Hawaiian people have always known this. They have built with the understanding that Peel decides what remains and what is reclaimed. They have mourned losses, yes, but they have also celebrated the new land, the fresh soil, the way life returns to cooled lava within years. This is not resignation, this is wisdom. In 2018, when lava flows destroyed homes in the Puna district, the grief was real and profound. Families lost everything. Communities were displaced. But alongside the grief was a quiet acceptance and understanding that this is part of living on an active volcano. Some chose to rebuild, others moved away. But few expressed anger at the mountain itself. Because anger at a volcano makes no sense within a worldview that sees the volcano as family. You do not rage at your grandmother for growing old. You do not curse the ocean for its tides. You accept. You adapt. You continue. This resilience is not passivity. It is a form of strength that comes from deep cultural continuity. From knowing that your ancestors faced the same challenges, made the same choices, and survived. From understanding that you are part of a story larger than your individual life. When visitors come to Kilauea now, they see a spectacle, a glowing lake of lava, a natural wonder, something to photograph and post online. But for the Hawaiian people, they see something more. They see home. They see continuity. They see Peel, still creating, still shaping the land, still present. And that presence, however fierce, however unpredictable, is a comfort. Because it means the story is not over. The land is still being written, and they are still here to witness it. Kilauea is not alone. Across the planet, approximately 1,500 volcanoes are considered active, meaning they have erupted within the last 10,000 years. Of these, roughly 50 are erupting at any given moment, some violently, some quietly, some in remote regions where no one watches. Others in the midst of populated areas where millions live in the shadow of volcanic peaks. We live on a geologically active planet. The ground beneath our feet is not as stable as we imagine. But most of us, most of the time, do not think about this. We go about our lives assuming that mountains will remain where they are, that the Earth's surface is fixed, that catastrophe is something that happens elsewhere to other people. Kilauea reminds us otherwise. And in doing so, it offers lessons that extend far beyond Hawaiʻi. The first lesson is about preparedness. When the lava lake drained in 2018 and the summit collapsed, it was not a surprise to volcanologists. The signs had been building for weeks: increased seismicity, ground deformation, changes in gas emissions. The Hawaiian Volcano Observatory issued warnings. Evacuation orders were enacted. And while the destruction was significant, not a single life was lost. This is extraordinary. In other parts of the world, volcanic eruptions have killed thousands in moments. Mount Pelée in Martinique, 1902, nearly 30,000 dead. Nevado del Ruiz in Colombia, 1985, more than 23,000 buried in mudflows. Mount Nyiragongo in the Democratic Republic of Congo, 2002, lava flows through the city of Goma, hundreds of thousands displaced. The difference is not the volcanoes themselves. The difference is monitoring, infrastructure, communication, investment in science. Hawaii has spent more than a century building the capacity to understand Kilauea, the observatory, the instruments, the trained personnel, the protocols for public safety. This did not happen by accident. It happened because people recognized that living near an active volcano requires vigilance. Many countries do not have this luxury. Indonesia has more active volcanoes than any nation on Earth, over 120. The Philippines has more than 20. Japan, Mexico, Chile, Papua New Guinea, all have populations living in volcanic zones. But not all have the resources to monitor every peak, to maintain networks of seismometers and gas sensors, to train scientists and emergency responders. The result is predictable. Eruptions occur with little warning, communities are caught unprepared, casualties mount. Kilauea offers a model not perfect, but functional for how societies can coexist with volcanic risk. But the second lesson is more subtle. It is about humility. Despite all the technology, all the data, all the decades of study, scientists still cannot predict exactly when a volcano will erupt. They can identify periods of increased likelihood, they can recognize warning signs, but they cannot say with certainty, this volcano will erupt on this date at this time. Volcanoes are complex systems, influenced by countless variables occurring at depths we cannot directly observe. Magma chambers are not uniform reservoirs. They are networks of interconnected pockets, some liquid, some partially solidified, all responding to pressures and temperatures that fluctuate constantly. A small change in one part of the system can cascade unpredictably. This is not a failure of science. This is the nature of the phenomenon. Weather forecasting faces similar challenges. We can predict a hurricane's general path, but not exactly where it will make landfall. We can estimate rainfall totals, but not precisely which neighborhoods will flood. Complexity limits certainty. Volcanology is no different. And accepting this limitation is essential. Because when we pretend to know more than we do, when we issue false assurances or overconfident predictions, we erode public trust. People stop listening to warnings. They become complacent. Better to say clearly, we are watching, we are measuring. We will alert you if conditions change, but we cannot tell you exactly what will happen or when. This honesty, paradoxically, builds credibility. The third lesson concerns time. Kilauea has been erupting intermittently for 600,000 years. The current eruptive period, which began in 1983, is only a moment in that vast span. Even the 2018 collapse and the 2020 return of the lava lake are merely chapters in a much longer narrative. We, as individuals, experience only the briefest fragment of this story. But collectively, as a species, we have the capacity to observe and document across generations. The data collected today will inform scientists a century from now. The patterns recognized in this eruption will help interpret future eruptions, perhaps on volcanoes that have not yet formed. This is the power of institutional knowledge. The Hawaiian Volcano Observatory has operated continuously since 1912. That means there are unbroken records spanning more than a century documenting how Kilauea behaves under different conditions, how eruptions evolve, how the volcano responds to changes in magma supply. No single scientist has witnessed all of this, but the institution has. And that continuity is invaluable. Other observatories around the world in Italy, Japan, Iceland, Ecuador, New Zealand serve similar functions. They're repositories of knowledge maintained across decades, sometimes centuries, by successive generations of researchers. This is not glamorous work. It does not produce immediate results. It does not generate headlines. But it is foundational. It is the slow, patient accumulation of understanding that allows us to live more safely in a dynamic world. The fourth lesson is perhaps the most difficult to articulate. It is about acceptance. We cannot stop volcanoes from erupting. We cannot cap Kilauea, drain its magma chamber, or divert its lava flows permanently. The forces at work are too vast, the energies too immense. All we can do is learn to live alongside them. This requires a shift in perspective, away from the idea that nature is something to be controlled, and toward the understanding that we are participants in natural systems, not masters of them. Indigenous cultures have often grasped this more fully than industrialized societies. The Hawaiian relationship with Peel, the Icelandic respect for their volcanic landscapes, the Japanese reverence for Mount Fuji, all reflect an acceptance of the Earth's power and a willingness to adapt rather than resist. Modern science is slowly arriving at the same conclusion. Not because technology has failed, but because technology has revealed the true scale of geological forces. We can measure the energy released by a volcanic eruption. We can calculate the volume of magma moving beneath the surface. And we can see clearly that these forces are orders of magnitude beyond anything humanity can counteract. The only rational response is humility. And with humility comes a different kind of wisdom, the wisdom to build thoughtfully, to plan with nature in mind, to accept that some places will always carry risk, and that living in those places requires both courage and respect. Kilauea teaches this lesson daily. The lava lake glows on. The mountain continues its work. And those who watch, whether scientists with instruments or Hawaiians with chants, understand that they are witnessing something fundamental. Not a disaster, not a problem to be solved, but the Earth being itself, powerful, ancient, indifferent to our timelines, and absolutely magnificent. As we near the end of this story, it is worth pausing to consider what we have witnessed. Not simply an eruption, not merely the return of a lava lake to a crater that had been empty, but something more fundamental. We have watched the Earth renew itself. Kilauea's lava lake, as of early 2024, continues to glow. The surface rises and falls with the rhythm of magma moving beneath. The crust breaks and reforms. Gas vents release plumes of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. The cycle repeats day after day with a consistency that is both reassuring and humbling. The mountain has settled into its work. And that work, the work of building new land, of transforming molten rock into solid ground, is the same work it has been doing for hundreds of thousands of years. We are not witnessing something new. We are witnessing something eternal. There is a particular quality to standing at the edge of Halemaʻumaʻu crater at night. The air is cool. The sky above is vast and filled with stars that have shone over this volcano for millennia. And below, the glow. That persistent, ancient glow. It is easy in that moment to feel small. Not insignificant. Not meaningless. But small in the way that connects you to something larger. Small in a way that reminds you that you are part of a story that began long before you arrived and will continue long after you are gone. This is not a melancholy realization. It is a liberating one. Because it means that the pressure to control, to dominate, to bend the world entirely to human will, that pressure dissolves. You cannot control a volcano. You can only witness it, respect it, learn from it. And perhaps in doing so, you learn something about yourself. The scientists who have monitored this eruption over the past 4 years have accumulated an extraordinary amount of data. Thousands of seismic readings, daily measurements of ground deformation, thermal images capturing every shift in the lava lake's temperature, gas samples analyzed for chemical composition. This data will be studied for decades. It will inform models of how magma moves through volcanic systems. It will refine predictions about future eruptions. It will contribute to a global understanding of how our planet works. But beyond the data, beyond the measurements, there is something else that has been recorded. A reminder. A reminder that the Earth is not static. That the ground beneath our cities, our homes, our lives, is part of a dynamic system that operates on timescales we can barely comprehend. Mountains rise, continents drift, oceans open and close. And in the midst of all this grand, slow transformation, we live our brief lives, building, creating, loving, learning. Our impermanence does not diminish us.
It connects us to everything else that is impermanent.
To the forests that grow and burn and grow again. To the rivers that carve valleys over millions of years. To the stars themselves, which burn brightly for a time and then fade. Kilauea will not erupt forever. One day, perhaps thousands of years from now, perhaps tens of thousands, the hotspot will move on. The Pacific Plate will carry the island beyond the reach of the mantle plume. Eruptions will cease. The lava will cool for the last time. And Kilauea will join the older Hawaiian islands to the northwest, Maui, Oahu, Kauai mountains that were once volcanoes, now dormant, slowly eroding back into the sea. But that day is not today. Today, the mountain lives. Today, the lava lake glows. And today, we have the privilege of witnessing it. The native Hawaiian people have a word, malama, which means to care for, to preserve, to protect. It is used in the context of malamajina, caring for the land. But it is more than environmental stewardship, it is relationship, it is reciprocity. The land cares for us by providing what we need to live. And we, in turn, care for the land by respecting its power, honoring its presence, and passing that respect to the next generation. This is not unique to Hawaiian culture. Indigenous peoples around the world have developed similar relationships with the landscapes they inhabit. They understand what modern society is only beginning to relearn, that we are not separate from nature. We are embedded within it. And when we act as if we are separate, when we treat the earth as a resource to be extracted rather than a system to be respected, we create problems that cascade across generations. Climate change, species extinction, soil degradation, water scarcity. These are not abstract issues. They are the consequences of forgetting that we are part of something larger. Kilauea, in its own way, teaches this lesson. It does not ask for our permission to erupt. It does not negotiate. It simply is powerful, ancient, indifferent to human plans. And in confronting that power, we are reminded of our place. Not as masters of the earth, but as residents, temporary, responsible. As this documentary draws to a close, the lava lake continues. The instruments continue their watch. The scientists continue their analysis. And the Hawaiian people continue their relationship with Peel, offering chants and hoʻokupu, maintaining traditions that have endured longer than any written record. The story does not end here. It never ends. Because the Earth's story is still being written. Kilauea will erupt again in ways we cannot yet predict. New land will form. Old land will be reclaimed. The cycle will continue. And if we are wise, if we are humble, if we are willing to listen to the scientists, to the elders, to the mountain itself, we will continue to learn. We will continue to adapt. We will continue to walk alongside these powerful forces, not in fear, but in respect. The planet will continue its ancient rhythm long after we are gone. The magma will rise. The lava will flow. The mountains will grow and erode. This is not an ending. This is simply where we choose to pause. If you wish to keep walking beside these powerful forces, to continue witnessing the Earth's unfolding story, subscribe to Fury of the Earth. Join us as we follow the planet's quiet transformations, the deep rhythms that shape the world we call home. There are more stories waiting, more mountains to watch, more lessons to learn from a planet that has been teaching for 4.5 billion years. The fire still burns, the Earth still speaks. And for those willing to listen, there is always more to understand.